What's up gamers, and welcome back to another ProGuides Wild Rift video. Today we're going to show you 5 of the most underrated picks that will greatly increase your chances of winning. So without further ado, let's get straight to them. Number 1. Misfortune. This is a champion that has vanished from the Rift for quite some time, but she's actually way better than you think she is. She has agency in almost all lanes simply for the fact that she can poke out the enemy with their first ability. Also, not to be underestimated, is her speed when it comes to coming back to lane. Taking any kind of recall doesn't really matter for her, as she just walks back to lane in a super fast fashion. So what does the champion actually do? Ideally, it pokes you out in lane and acquires a lane advantage early on. With this, she tries to snowball. However, even if she doesn't snowball, she can still remain useful in any kind of scenario. Just have to be aware of champions such as Braum and Yasuo. Because if every of your abilities is block, yeah, you're in for a bad time. But even in a scenario in which you're not really fed, you can still provide zone control. Your third ability and your ultimate ability make it a living hell for the enemy team to play. Because if they engage into your team and you're in a safe position to use your ultimate, you can just blast them. But make sure to use your third ability first and then your ultimate, so they're slowed. In terms of runes, you should always take Conqueror, and then afterwards, as you are an AD carry, just tank Vampirism. It's an important rune and it's very broken as well. For summoner spells, take Flash and Barrier, and after you have your Mana Mune, you can think about building anything you want that's typical for AD carry. But for our armor pen item, we want Cyrilda's Grudge. With that, our ultimate ability also slows, which means they're stuck in it, and we can just blast them. But why exactly are people looking down on this champion? Well, if we're honest, this champion cannot compete in terms of damage with the other meta AD carries. For example, she has no chance against the Varus. I mean, who does if we're honest? She cannot really fight the Kai'Sa, and the Draven just runs over her. The only thing she has going for her is her zoning utility and the ability to zone you in lane by punishing you with her first ability. Other than that, she is vastly inferior to the other champions. However, she can still be very broken simply for the fact that people don't know her anymore. And especially if you're facing a team that has trouble getting to you, you can just make sure to use her and get some kills. And with that, let's just go straight to our question of the day. What is your favorite game next to Wild Rift? Currently, mine is New World. It's a very relaxing game, so what about you? Let me know in the comments below. Next up on this list is Nasus. Nasus as a champion is an absolute scaling monster. If you pick the right runes and the right items, it's very hard to get Nasus out of lane. So what does this champion do? Well, first off, as I've already told you, it's a scaling monster. But as the game goes on, he can do multiple things at once. He can be a split push god. He can be very annoying in teamfights thanks to his second ability Wither, which basically takes away your ability to move. Well, not really, but it feels like it. And on top of that, your attack speed is completely demolished, so you turn to something useless. Especially AD carries hate this champion. But his probably greatest asset is his level 5 spike. I think no champion in the game, in a straight up fight, can beat him once he hits level 5. He just beats you up. His first ability's cooldown is cut in half thanks to his ultimate ability. He gains health and he gains resistances at the same time, while he removes attack speed and movement speed from you. How can you beat that? You just don't. You just don't even try at that point. You just need to be very careful not to die to him. And to make sure you as a Nasus never die, you just take Fleet Footwork. With Fleet Footwork, you have infinite sustain in lane. Especially into hard matchups such as a Fiora, it's just super nice to have. On top of that, you might even take Second Wind. That way there's no way you can ever die. And for the trading pattern, all you have to do is auto-attack and use your first ability instantly as an auto-attack cancel once she lunges towards you. Make sure she suffers from her mistakes. And as for summoner spells, you can be a little bit fancier here. You can think about taking Ghost and Exhaust. But why exactly Ghost and Exhaust? Well, your champion is obnoxious. It doesn't really have mobility, it just runs after you. But with the Ghost, you run faster into their direction and you can just run them down. And with the Exhaust, you can double down on those fights and make sure that nothing, even in a 2v1 situation, can beat you. And if you want the most out of lane, start with the Longsword. The Longsword empowers your Fleet Footwork. It's just crazily broken in that regard. After that, build a Sheen. It's the best early game item for your champion, thanks to the interaction with Q. Then you want to finish your Trinity Force and afterwards you can sit on a Tear of the Goddess. Otherwise, if you have some spare gold left, you can also just buy a mana crystal. But keep in mind, just keep it in your inventory and let it stack up. Because there's one thing you will learn when you play Nasus. Mana is an issue. So be really careful when you want to use your second and third ability. They drain you very fast. But why exactly are people looking down on Nasus? It's quite simple. He's played wrong most of the time. People think Baron laners should be on the same level as Fiora, constantly bullying your enemy. But with the Nasus, you have to think about multiple things at once. Number 1, what is your wave position? You want to stack up and get to your level 5. That's your primary goal. Other than that, you just want to be a setup for your jungle with your slow. You just don't have to try to force anything, just get to level 5, make sure you play it clean, and then you will win your lane. But don't try what your champion can't do. Every champion has a certain identity, and if you play alongside that, your chances of winning go up by quite a lot. So let's move on to our next pick. This champion has been kind of forgotten, even though he's absolutely insane, still. And I'm talking about Alistar in the support role. Yes, he has been nerfed ages ago, but he's still strong as ever. He still does what he does, and he still doesn't get stopped by anything if the team plays around it. So what does the champion do? If there's one thing an Alistar does best, it's engaging. He just wants to go in and cause havoc. He wants to go on your carries and cause disruption and make sure his teammates can follow up. On top of that, he can also go for some flashy plays. But not everyone is capable of doing the flash combos, so you don't have to try too hard. But if you can, it looks really nice and it's really broken. But why exactly is it better than you think it is? This champion just doesn't die once he's in your team. He tanks 5 people and takes no damage thanks to his ultimate ability. By doing so, he creates so much room and space for his teammates to capitalize on and burst down or DPS down the enemy team. And with the recent buffs to Zeke's convergence, he is even better now. So for runes, go Aftershock. For summoner spells, Flash and Ignite, and for the build, go Deadman's Blade into Zeke's convergence. And not only that, for the boots, you want defensive boots with either a proto belt enchant if you need some more engage, like if you play against a lot of ranged champions and you need to close the gap, or if you play against a lot of melees, you can just take Redemption to deal more damage to the enemy and to keep your team healthy after they help you engage. But also be mindful if you're playing against a lot of AoE damage. In those situations, especially if it's burst damage, for example Izix with this ultimate ability, take Locket. With that, you block so much damage and your team will actually thank you for that. But why exactly isn't Alistar played? The reason is quite simple. People are more leaning towards enchanters right now. You barely see any tanks in the game. The only time you really see tanks is sometimes in a competitive environment. Other than that, maybe a Braum because Braum one tricks, but really? This champion is still obnoxiously strong, especially into enchanters, because once he's on top of their head, they don't get away. So for all the AD carry mains out there, let's just hope there will be new Alistar players relatively soon, because playing with an enchanter sometimes gets a little bit too boring. We want some action, so get more Alistars out there. And now let's move on to our 4th pick. Fizz. Fizz is crazy strong, and I don't honestly know why he isn't played at all. We see a lot of Ahri, but we don't see Fizz. So what does this champion do? Thanks to the buffs to his second ability, he has now decent wave clear. It's now an AoE splash, and if he does it smartly, he can get a reset on the spell by killing a minion with it. Not only that, since it's AoE, if the enemy champion is a melee champion, he might risk getting caught by the damage. However, that's not even close to being it. What makes it even more annoying is the fact that he can avoid anything you can throw in his direction, thanks to his little troll pole. And if that wasn't enough, he can also dash into Narnia with the speed of light. So how do you catch this guy? Well, if there are minions and if he's smart and good, it's very hard to even get him. You really need to wait for him to make a mistake to punish him. However, if he is patient and just doesn't make a mistake, I don't think there's any world in which you can just kill him in lane. But why exactly is this champion better than you think it is right now? So imagine you use your cooldowns in a lane. Imagine you use a vital cooldown, and he just dodges this cooldown to engage onto you. Then he quickly outtrades you and jumps away, or rather dashes away. Now you've been put to like 50% HP, and if the same thing happens again, you're dead. And you now have to keep that in mind after just one little mistake. So some would say that isn't even that bad, but now the real bad thing happens. His ultimate ability. Once he gets access to that, you need to be really careful, because if you're attacked by the fish, you'll find yourself respawning relatively soon after. And then the issue of snowballing happens, cause once the fish is fed, he can kill you without using his ultimate, because he can just straight up two-shot you. That sounds fun, right? I mean, as the Fizz it's fun, for you it's not so much fun. So let's get to the items and runes to make him playable. We want Electrocute. Electrocute helps us to put emphasis on our trading pattern. We want a short burst trade to then bounce away again. For summoner spells, we just take Flash and Ignite, more safety and more damage. For the build, we want Ludens Echo for the mana and abilities and the bonus burst damage. And then afterwards we want to buy a Rabadon's Death Cap. Once you get those items, you can make a decision shortly after. Do you want the Void Staff or the Lichbane? It just basically depends on what you're facing, how many resistances they already have and what you want to do. But other than that, your options are completely free and you'll kill anyone anyway, unless they are a tank. So let's move on to our very last pick on this list. For this, we got the Lady Vi. For runes, we take Conqueror, for summoners we take Flash and Smite, and for items we take Starrick's Gauge and Defensive Boots with the Gargoyle enchant. However, for this build there's one thing we need to mention. This build is not necessarily a carry build. It's supposed to just soak damage and go into tank. So our primary job will consist of ulting a target in the backline and cause some confusion there. We'll still be able to inflict a lot of damage, but we'll survive so much longer. However, if you're looking for a more carry-oriented build, you can go for a Triforce into a Death Stance into Dennis Starrick's Gauge. That way you'll make sure you have a lot of damage, and you can even add more on-hit items later that grant you more attack speed. It's basically up to you what you want to build at that point. But now let's talk about what this champion does. This champion is very good at farming. It kills things very fast and has decent clear for anything you want to do, even epic monsters. But the biggest thing this champion does is making sure you'll always catch somebody off guard. At least to be honest, you will still force them to buy a Zhonya's later on, because if they don't have one, well, they're most likely going to die very fast. But thanks to this champion you will always have the tool to engage no matter what. And especially if you're paired up with a Galio, you make up for a pretty nice combo that the enemy needs to respect, and if they don't, well, you got an easy win on your hands. But why exactly is this champion looked down upon? Well, we still live in a world in which Lee Sin is one of the most crazy junglers in the game and the most annoying at the same time. So, as long as he's still in the game, well, other junglers will have a hard time. Other than Lee Sin, you still have Kha'Zix. I mean, yeah, he was nerfed recently, but he is still a menace to reckon with. Nonetheless, we can all still pray towards better times in which the passive experience for the jungle role is removed and we get some more skill expression in terms of farming in there. And with that, we're at the end of this video. Thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and sub to the channel, so you never miss anything ProGuides ever again.